And then he snickered deviously. Reverse psychology. Always works like a dream. His axle boxes stopped leaking. The grease ran into his bearings once more. He was oilier than ever. The station was really rather breathtaking. It had 4 huge canopies that slowly curved with the platforms, and each one was sized differently than the last. The great white semicircles changed from big to small, alternating with rhythm, like a waddle or a waltz. It was certainly worthy of postcards. Diesel had no doubt he'd inadvertently stolen a few tiny pictures of Paddington when he'd absconded with the mail train a few days back. Staring up at it, even devious Diesel could not deny the majesty of Paddington Station. And he was going to ruin it. He could see more than just the station from his siding. He could see the offices that adjoined the engine shed he was sitting in. There were a few doors that led into the structure. Some were marked and some weren't, but only one of them was of interest to Diesel. He smiled slimily. It was the door to the engine driver's common room. Now he had only to wait. Sure enough, it wasn't long before a railway employee came wandering out. Diesel turned on the charm. "Excuse me, sir," he oozed. "I believe you're my driver this afternoon." The man stopped in his tracks and pondered. "Can't be. Jim wouldn't be back at the engine yet." "Oh, he was," lied Diesel. "He was impressively quick today." The driver twiddled his jaw, trying to make sense of the situation. With some hesitation, he began his inspections. "Well, you seem in order," he said dreamily. "Awfully grimy, though. I can't even see your number anymore." "I am indeed due for a wash," said Diesel sadly, mimicking the disposition of a certain old blue engine who was once desperate for a day out. "Perhaps you can give me a wash when we're through." "If you perform well," said the driver firmly, and then he boarded the wrong Diesel, none the wiser. A wash indeed. Diesel would never have dreamed of it. Diesel glided giddily into the station, not a single squeak in his suspension. A grungy-looking Class 45 was just decoupling from his train. He spared the Diesel a slightly hung-over look before rumbling away to the sheds. A shunter honed in on the unfortunate line of coaches. They were much more streamlined than the ones he'd grown accustomed to on Sodor. Their jet-plane-like windows and sleek steel bodies radiated modernity. Maybe he would have told them that, if he had had the decency to compliment them. But this wasn't Edward. This was devious Diesel. He gave them a bump, cried one. "Those are unfamiliar buffers." He jerked them backward hastily, and they all squealed. Diesel just cackled. "Easy, old boy," called the driver. "They are trucks." But that constructive criticism would do no good. Diesel wasn't listening. With a precise and purposeful tug, Diesel pulled the lead coach's front bogie off the tracks. She dragged along the sleepers with a mournful thudda, 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 thudda. "Bother!" shouted the driver. "We'll have to wait for a crane. Let's just tuck them back onto platform 7 then, out of the way." So Diesel tucked them back in. But not far enough. That had always been the plan. Now, the lead carriage was blocking the main switch by just a hair. Enough that an oncoming train wouldn't notice it, but not enough that it would clear it. He turned his attention to some third-class carriages on Platform 2, which were looking rather sleepy after a strenuous run. They didn't have the same stamina that the express coaches were known for. Diesel woke them with a violent whir of his wheels. "This way, dears," he implored them slimily. Despite their protests, he hurled them across the yard and pulled them down the wrong siding before the signalman had time to set the points. The driver's knuckles had turned white. The throttle was jammed hard in reverse. Until it wasn't, and Diesel came to a total halt. He and the coaches were sitting on a major entry line, one of the only ones that led back to the carriage yards. "What are you playing at?" called a very groggy coach. "We're on the wrong line. We're meant to go to platform 5 next." "On the contrary, my dear," insisted the Diesel. "You are right where I want you." A horn blared in the distance, and a dull gray Class 52 rattled tiredly past. He was headed for platform 8. As he rounded the bend and flew over the main switches that granted entry to every platform of the station, he grew closer and closer to the head of Diesel's train. Diesel had barely left any clearance. "Jiminy Christmas!" cried the big Diesel, and he slammed on his brakes. The rear coach shut her eyes tight. Both engine and carriage were sure they were going to collide. But they didn't, because that had never been the plan. Diesel's face split into a huge grin as his true intentions came to pass. The sudden stop had jarred every coach in the train. They ran into each other like dominoes, and each one derailed, hurtling this way and that. It was a miracle they stayed upright at all. The whole yard was thrown into a panic, but there was worse to come. Unable to stop in time, the gray Diesel was horrified when he spotted Diesel's second booby trap, the train he had shunted earlier, its derailed bogie hanging just far enough out of Platform 7 that there was no way the Diesel could get past without a disaster. He clipped it with incredible force. The coach's buffer was torn clean off and went flying, crashing through the station's glass roof and carrying on into the sky. The Diesel found himself tipping dangerously to the left, and when gravity overtook him at last, he tipped over and skated across the adjoining track on his side. His train, still dancing painfully along the sleepers, slowly dragged to a halt. When everything was finally out of motion, the true scale of the calamity became apparent. Devious Diesel had successfully blocked every platform of Paddington Station.